The following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
Yeah, no, but like God really did do that through the dude.
Wild coincidence considering what happened with the Olympics. Anyways.
Yeah, very. Let's not quite get into that. I will let you assume my gender. That's all I got. That's the best I got. This is not a funny episode. I'm sorry, guys. All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast. I'm one of your hosts here, Caleb. To my left is...
I'm Joshua. To my left is...
Me, Caleb. Technically, you can't have two people sitting left to one another, eh?
No.
It doesn't work that way.
Unless
we moved.
No, unless we're on a spherical Earth.
If that was true, sure.
Yep. And our what is it? If we're sitting on lateral lines or horizontal or vertical lines around latitude and longitude, those are the words. We're either sitting on latitudinal or longitudinal lines. Because it's a sphere, those will cross if they're not completely parallel. If they're not exactly parallel.
I think you're thinking way too hard about this.
And so we could at some point be to our left.
Other episodes where we do have enough people for us to actually have, form a shape that makes sense, and it's to my left. You can find our other episodes at www.secondраtesaints.com. That will have links to our Apple Podcast, to Spotify, to our YouTube channel, where you can also find those episodes, along with some of our other content is there as well. On that website, you can find our book reviews, our blog, as well as a link to our Buy Me a Coffee. Or you can go www.buymeacoffee.com/Second Rate Saints. We appreciate it when you guys support us. Additionally, just below that Buy Me a Coffee link, you can see a DM us. And so you can, if you go to our website, you can actually, send us a question, send us a comment, send us a concern of yours, or you can email us at secondratesaints@gmail.com. And
if you're one of the people that quoted Hail Satan underneath the Satan episode, don't. That was not very nice.
It's also wrong.
Also wrong. The episode is very clearly saying Jesus is king.
Interesting. For those who have been paying attention for the last few episodes, we have been, our 100th episode's coming up. To be honest with you, we are not receiving questions anymore for the 100th episode. That being said, send us questions anyway.
Yes.
And look forward to that episode. It's going to be great.
Yep.
So,
and your questions will be used in future TERT episodes.
That's Joel's Thoughts in Real Time episodes, which are phenomenal. Josh.
Yes.
You know how to read, correct?
Yes.
Interesting.
I did an audiobook this time.
Oh, so you didn't have to know how to read.
I just had to know how to listen.
Sometimes
yes.
harder.
I read a book that is very different from the other books that I normally read, which was a historical biography, kind of. The book is called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s by Tom O'Neill.
That's some light reading there you got.
Yeah, so it's a pretty big book.
How long is it to listen to?
The total time, 1 second, let me get to it, it's 13 chapters, each are an hour and a half long.
Okay.
So it's pretty long.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very interesting. It covers the Charles Manson murders in California. But then he discusses the prosecutor named Vincent Buglioni, who wrote the book Helter Skelter, which was about the definitive, what happened because of his position there with all the evidence.
See, if you had only read the book, you wouldn't know how to pronounce that guy's last name.
Nope. Yes, you're right.
But it's because you listen to it. You can.
Yes.
Nice.
He's a very famous prosecutor at the time. Very interesting history because everybody's got their theory about who was Charles Manson, what was he doing, why the killing, how did he get these young people to commit the crime for him, how much was he involved? And it was part of the discussion of, is he culpable? Is somebody that gets somebody to murder as culpable as them? Specifically, if they were not the kind of people that would do such a thing. And so it got into all of questions of like, it was partly used as like the evidence of why LSD was bad. It was the ending of the hippie movement. Deeply involved in like big 60s time. All theories of like why Charles Manson killed these people, why they did it in such a brutal way. It affected Hollywood in such a strong way that Hollywood changed. And so the author wrote this book because he was a magazine writer at the time and was told to do a piece for the 30th anniversary of the Charles Manson murder. And through his investigation got way more than could be written in just this piece and he knew there was much, much more to be done and couldn't do it for the timeline.
Now I know that there's ties to the CIA and their, I can't think of the operation name or the project name.
MK Ultra.
MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Judging from the title, I'm sure he gets into that.
Yes.
How much does he get into that? How reliable do you think he is on that?
Yes. So, his quoting of sources is unending.
Okay.
Like, so the whole book is from the first person perspective of him actually talking about him investigating the stuff.
Interesting.
Not just about the findings. And so inside is also the discussions he had with the people. He became friends with one of the victim's parents. He met with literally all of the investigators of all the cops.
Okay.
He met with people that were CIA agents. He traveled the country for almost 20 years investigating this. It consumed his life and went everywhere, delving into unsolved crimes that were definitely Charles Manson and that other cops. So this is where like the conspiratorial stuff gets involved.
Okay.
Because the discussion was the CIA, the CIA involvement was not a part of the original prosecution.
Yeah.
Those two crimes were Charles Manson messing with people's minds, brainwashing them to commit these crimes. And everything else related was hogwash. The CIA never got brought up in the prosecution. But then through his studies and through getting to know the prosecutor and discussions with him that are recorded, talked about how there was a big program to get cops to not do certain things or to hide evidence or that they had already known about Charles Manson. They'd let him go on multiple crimes that would have put him in prison. Like he would show up to prison. A guy would come and say, no, this is not your jurisdiction. We're letting him go. Like easy
weird
things.
Stuff.
And he would go into prison being like, you guys can't touch me. And then would be released.
And is there, just for people who don't know, like the connections with MK Ultra and the messings of the CIA, how much of that would be considered conspiracy?
Yeah.
Versus how much of that is like, no, that is open. Like we know that's a fact. Like people acknowledge this. The CIA acknowledges it.
So the MK Ultra program was announced by the United States through investigations that it did exist under the CIA. Half the CIA didn't even know it existed. Through a transfer of one of the CIA directors, he was not told about the program because part of the CIA is being compartmentalized. Yeah. It's one of their facets that makes them so interesting. But during that period, there was two programs, one called COINTELPRO which is a famous program that was found out about America being spied on by the CIA.
Mhm.
Massive, tens of thousands of employees watching American citizens trying to find communist like outliers during the Cold War,
The
and
Red
like
Scare and
influences, all that stuff. And another program called Chaos, which was the CIA stopping those things from happening. And the way they did that was they would join the groups, turn them violent to discredit them by the populace's view. So basically, what would be a peaceful group, they turn violent so that the people go, oh, that group's terrible, so that they don't join or get involved. And that basically Chaos, through the use of MK Ultra to end the hippie movement, used Charles Manson.
Okay, hang on. That's the argument of the author, right?
Yes.
Do other people come to the same conclusion?
Yes.
Interesting. I'm going to have to think about this.
And so part of it was one of the scientists involved in MK Ultra was a guy named Jolly West, who at basically he is all through the MK Ultra papers.
Mm-hmm. Which CIA did release some of, did they not?
There were 16,000 files that were not destroyed that were left in an office that they forgot about.
Yeah.
That the United States government outside of the CIA found and was like, hey, what the hell is this?
Yeah. And that's been opened.
Yeah. And the MK Ultra, so MK Ultra is the idea of can you make a sleeper agent?
Yeah.
Or how much drugs do you have to pump into somebody to get them to do something that they would not do?
Yeah.
Morally themselves.
And there was many different inhumane ways that they tried to reach those ends.
Yeah. The most mundane ways and the most common ways is advertising. But the crazy ones are what if you gave LSD to a group of people and then planted a false memory in them so that they could act upon that rather than the memory that they've forgotten? Which, when you find out that the parole officer that was Charles Manson's parole officer was himself a CIA agent involved in Chaos, who had ties with Jolly West, who met Manson multiple times at a clinic that Jolly West worked at, which gave LSD for free. It's called the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, which the CIA did multiple tests on citizens.
And that's that connection.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's the sleeper agent to make to bring about and discredit the hippie movement, that's separate. But those connections are not conspiracy. That's not in the realm of conspiracy.
It's not.
That's open source. Yeah. People know this.
The CIA was well involved with Charles Manson, whether they intended him to get involved in murders. They definitely did not intend him to murder people. But everything he was doing with the LSD with his little cult which is the described program that MK Ultra was doing to people.
So this is not, we don't normally talk about books like this. So it's fascinating. I do actually find
it is a wild book.
Who would you recommend it to?
History buffs of American post World War history.
You'd say Cole.
Yeah. It is if you need a shakeup of your normal reading and you just want to read something wild, where you're just I want to follow the rabbit trail of what you think was just a normal solved crazy murder, then becomes core to basically Charles Manson, the evil murderer that he was, is what happens when your government or groups in your government start to make morally questionable arguments we need to do this for the best of the country and not tell the country.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff happens.
What would you rate it 1 out of 5?
3.5.
Okay.
It's long.
Yeah.
And so
a little too long.
You couldn't make it shorter.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there is the fact what I just said sounds nuts. And it is. if you don't go through the whole chain of how these people knew each other and the way the police played a role and the way the DA's office played a role through Vincent Buglioni, and the crazy history of the 60s, just playing into that. And that's why it's all tied together in a long history, because to get from Charles Manson to the CIA MK Ultra program,
trying to
you have
undo
to read
the hippie movement.
You have to read 400 pages or listen to 100 hours of.
Would it just be the hippies versus the CIA?
Yeah, basically. He was a test subject that realized what they were doing and then started doing it. He wasn't like he's evil.
Mm-hmm.
Like he took something that they were doing on him.
Interesting.
And he's 100% culpable. Like it's none of this. At no point does the guy try to excuse Charles Manson. It's just, why does this guy out of nowhere know how to do these things? And why is it he goes to the clinic as just a criminal, but then comes out as a cult leader?
Yeah.
Able to do things, manipulate people. Like,
interesting.
Yeah.
For sure. But we're going to move on from our what have you read
to the Bible.
To the Bible. Still some wild stuff, though.
Yes.
No shortage of life-changing wild stuff in the Bible, though. We are going to continue on with our Acts series, as you are well aware from the title of this video or audio file that you're listening to. Yeah, so we're in Acts 17.
Mm-hmm.
Josh.
What happened last time?
What happened previously on Acts?
Yes, I'll let you have that.
Thank you.
I won't say it. So Timothy joins Paul and Silas, which is cool because Barnabas and Paul have separated, probably on not great terms, but they're not having. They've decided to do ministry separate because two is better than one. So let's go on separate missionary trips and get some new trainees to join with us. Paul then goes and converts Lydia, and then Paul and Silas end up in prison and convert the Philippian jailer, which is a beautiful story because basically the jailer thinks he's going to die, but sees these guys worshiping God, and Paul and Silas are like, no, don't kill yourself. And they save this man, and he ends up, and his whole household gets converted.
Yeah.
But he thought he was done.
Yeah. Converted, baptized into the family.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
He, one of the saints now. He's one of us. We're going to, what's crazy? This guy, we're going to get to meet him.
Oh, yes. Kind of.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm just saying. Like all these characters we get to meet, but the ones that are saved, but like Lydia, like eventually that's just going to be
what kind of purple things did you sell?
Yeah.
The Bible just told me purple things.
Lydia up in heaven. Yeah, it's kind of misleading.
I sold other things than just purple.
Or you get up and she's just like got her store in heaven, and it's just she's selling multiple types of things like kitchenware.
It's just anything that's purple.
Everything's purple.
I'm the purple seller.
Yeah. So yeah, beautiful stories of Paul going through the Philippian area and Macedonia, having that weird discussion of where God is leading them and kind of following wherever it is the Holy Spirit is leading them, not just going wherever Paul wants, which is it's not a foreign idea, but it seems so much more exaggerated here.
Yeah.
Where like, oh, the Holy Spirit told us not to go. That seems like such a wild statement.
And we brought up a lot of, in our last episode when we were talking about them in Philippi, about Roman culture, why it was so important, and like why does Paul's appeal all of a sudden to his citizenship? What does that mean? And why he's like, no, get the magistrates to come down here. And so he uses a facet of the Gentile culture for the advancement of the gospel, right? Because like what we mentioned last time was this, there's going to be a legitimization and an encouragement of the Christians that are still in Philippi when he leaves.
Yeah. And that leads us to Acts 17, verses 1-4. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, saying, "This Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ." And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a Jew of the leading women.
And not a few.
And not a few of the leading women. Not a singular Jew from the women.
No.
Only male converts.
Nope, that's not what it says.
Nope. And not a few. Okay.
Yeah. So I think Thessalonica seems to be the place that has the next Jewish synagogue.
Yeah.
He passes through a couple towns and says, here's a Jewish synagogue. We're gonna camp here for a little bit. Do you find it interesting that if he is sent out to preach the gospel to the Gentiles, he's still like, yeah, but go to the Jews first?
He does.
And why do you think that could be?
I mean, he could be, yes, he's going to the Gentiles, like he's going to the Gentile areas, like the countries. But if you're going to invade, you got to get a beachhead. Right. And so you need that first zone, and synagogues proved be very useful, and it kind of follows loose, like in a more abstract sense, Jesus' command, first the Jews, then the Gentiles.
That's where I was going to go.
And so God scattered his people for the benefit of the gospel in the future.
Well, and that's where you'd find, to emphasize your beachhead concept, that's where you would find the most sympathetic Gentiles.
Yes.
And that's reflected here in, I think it's in verse 4, where it says, and some of them were persuaded, and a great many of the devout Greeks.
Yeah.
Right. And those would be those God-fearers. Right? Whether or not that those would be true proselytes, meaning they had been circumcised, all that kind of stuff. They had been proto-baptized, which is more of a cleansing ritual. Yeah. Or whether they were just God-fearers in the sense that they were not fully bought in, and yet they were still monotheistic in some fashion. Yeah.
And Christianity offered them, we're biased here, but so much more, because if the synagogue or the Jews in the area did not allow them to become full Jewish, then you saw in Christianity the full welcoming of the convert.
I don't think that would have been necessarily a problem, especially for the diaspora in the places where Paul preaches.
Correct.
Perhaps more in North Africa. I think that may have been an issue. I think one of the things you have here too, and we brought it up a little bit in our last episode, you had like Roman culture for a long time had focused very much on like that strong, there's a social ethical responsibility to the larger group, right? And then that's made, maybe not manifest, but that's held personably, right? There's that virtue, right? And I think what a lot of happened with the almost every historian points it out, with the rise of the decline of the Republic and the rise of the Empire, there was an abandonment of classical Roman virtues and ethics.
Yeah,
and I think you had a lot like a strong yearning for an ethical way of life in a lot of Romans.
Yeah,
and it's worth pointing out that Rome has not syncretized very well, because Greek ends up becoming the dominant culture anyway, but Rome and Roman ideas become very prominent in Greece at this time. Like Philippi was a Roman settlement.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of the reasons with the scriptures? There's a couple ways to take that.
Yeah. So he reasons them with the scriptures, but he also states right after, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, which to my mind is like, well, that doesn't seem to be a proof of Christ necessarily, like in my current mind or culture. But for the Jewish context, which was awaiting the conquering king, the idea of him suffering and dying and rising from the dead both counters the messianic hope of the nationalistic, our king is going to come and save us from this evil empire, and the everyone in Judaism believed that everyone would be resurrected at the same time, not this individual that would be resurrected separately from the rest of humanity for some odd reason. Yeah. And so the fact that he's countering, like, he's reasoning with the scriptures, not just to prove that Christ is the Messiah, but doing so by showing that the Messiah understanding that they have presented by Christ is counter to the Jewish one. And so you have to go over, you have to defeat those two.
Subversive to the Jewish one.
Yeah. You have to defeat the two prominent ideas that they would come across and then show them. And Christ satisfies all the other reasons. And so.
Yeah. I find it, I don't know. I found it interesting. You see this, the same thing is kind of said for Jesus along the road to Emmaus with the two disciples. Yeah. He reasons with them about the scriptures of why this is about how the Christ was to come, blah, 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 die and rise again. You and I, in our best moments, might be able to have a multi-hour conversation about why Christ would come to die. How much of that would predominantly be made out of the New Testament? Like 80%, 90%.
Yep.
Right? These guys are doing it with just the Old for hours.
Just the Old, and for 3 Sabbath days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so multiple hours, several days. With Jesus and the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, it was several hours. This is even longer. Yeah. Right? Although it's probably more debate than conversation.
Yeah.
Here. I find that interesting, right? I think one of the difficulties I had in Bible college, and I'm still kind of working through it a bit, right? Is like, how do you, built within the Christian framework and the Christian revelation, is that Christ, what was hidden in the Old Testament is revealed in the New, right? There's a second part to that claim. There's a second part to that quote. It's from Augustine. And that Christ's ministry is all throughout the Old Testament. He's the fulfillment of all those things. However, critical scholarship in the last 100 years or so has heavily cut those ties very drastically. Yeah. And so you have books like Typology, the entire field of biblical theology that's trying to establish those links again, which is fascinating. But there's still a bit of a tendency to say, no, those connections aren't there.
This is going to be a wildly uneducated claim that I'm about to make.
Nice.
But it seems like because of the 2,000-year distance we have between us and Paul, it seems like, you learn, you read a 10-book series. Mm-hmm. You start to forget the first 2 books. You know the notes, you know the main characters, and you know what they did, but you start to forget everything. Mm-hmm. Like a lot. You don't remember everything, and the ending starts to take prominence. And so I think similarly in human history, there's a bit of it like we have the doctrines and we have the big systematics and we have all the doctrines that you and I hold, but then we started to like just take for granted some of the assumptions.
Sure.
Of like, well, why would there be a connection between the Old and New Testament? Because we haven't had to think about that for a long time. And so then a bunch of people did and went, hey, I don't see these connections very well.
Nowhere in the Old Testament does it explicitly say such and such.
Yeah.
Except for Isaiah, maybe.
Yeah.
They're like, but that's 3rd Isaiah, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then critical scholarship gets into it.
And so it's a bit like we have to rediscover what Paul was reasoning here.
Yeah. Well, and Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not that we disagree with the conclusion, just the math, the work.
I find it interesting because that was one of those things where when you ask, you'd read such a passage and then you'd ask somebody, so like, what does it mean that, he reasons from the scriptures that the Christ would suffer and rise from the dead? Where does it say that? And then people will go, well, here's all these, like, here's 74 prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. And it's like, that's not really what I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then, because I think a great book that talks about this and that I haven't found something better, is James M. Hamilton's Typology.
Yes.
And then it's like, well, it's not about explicitly saying that. It's based off of your learning from the Old Testament. You should expect this.
Yeah.
Not that it explicitly said that. However, there are places where it kind of does.
Yes. But again, it's kind of like that thing of you have the answer, but you didn't do the work, like in math. And the typology is the work that shows that answer is correct.
Yeah.
And Isaiah, though, is explicit in like, he will suffer, he will do this, is if you don't have all that work backed up, then it can easily, with an intelligent persuader, be undermined.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. But that leads us into more of what Paul says. Verse 5. But the Jews were jealous, and taking some wicked men of the rabble, they formed a mob and set the city in an uproar and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the crowd. And when they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city authorities, shouting, "These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also." And Jason has received them, and they were all acting against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus. And the people and the city authorities were disturbed when they heard these things. And when they had taken money as security from Jason and the rest, they let him go. I read too far ahead, but
no, it's okay. You're good.
Yep,
you're good.
Oh no, I did. Okay, yeah,
you done good.
So a riot.
Yep.
Who's Jason?
That's a Greek word. A Greek rendition of a version of Joshua.
Nice.
Yep.
Just like Jesus.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Joshua.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
there's so many versions of that. But yes,
Yeah.
it's another alternative spelling and pronunciation of the word.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Now, is he the leader of the synagogue?
No, unclear.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems
Important
more
man in city.
important man in city. It seems more like, if we're going to have to guess, especially from 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. And I'm thinking I'm getting information out of, I read a couple commentaries. I think this is out of F.F. Bruce. It seems more like Jason would have been one of the Jews that either accepted the gospel almost like right away, right?
Yep.
Or had already been a believer in Christ when Paul arrived.
Yeah.
Right. He's his host. Yeah. You're starting to notice a pattern across Acts, though.
Yes.
Right.
Is Paul goes into town, converts a bunch of people. The Jews get jealous, which is interesting. And so then they start opposing Paul.
But they don't just oppose him alone.
Yes. They get the city involved. But what's interesting is Paul says that this was God's purpose in Romans. He says that to make the Jews jealous, but so that they would come to him, not to start riots and kill his people.
Yeah.
And so their emotion is correct. But yeah, I understand why they're doing this.
I find it interesting.
They're malicious.
Yeah.
But I understand. Heretic just walked into the room and converted half your church. What do you do?
Start a riot. Yeah. I find it interesting that they've turned this whole world upside down.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the aspects is you have your polytheists, they have their thing. Then the Jews have their little section with their synagogue. And we're separate and we do our thing, but we're tolerant of one another. Then Paul comes in, right? Preaches the gospel, how God became man, how in him Jew and Gentile can be more than as they have been in the past, and the wall of hostility has been broken down. You can tell it's Ephesians. And this changes everything.
Yeah.
Right. This doesn't just change personal salvation. This is tied to his kingship, which actually is a reference later on.
Yes.
This is tied to, it changes the whole world. Right.
It also means that they understood what Paul was saying.
It means that they understood what Paul was saying, but it shows, they understand the larger argument to whatever degree.
Yeah.
It is interesting that the social implications of the gospel and what that means for Jew and Gentile.
Yeah.
Whatever sort of hostility that it plays to that, whatever assorted peace, whatever that means, the status quo before Paul, that whatever it threatens that, so they can come together and approach the civil authorities and say, hey, he's flipping the world upside down.
The image that came into my head, which is, I think what you're getting at, is the Jews were supposed to be holy, which means other. They were supposed to be distinguishable from the people around them. And yet in this, to keep the peace and the system that they've been living in, they unify with the other pagans and they become one with them rather than separate from them in opposition to Christ.
Yeah.
Which is wild because it's counter to what they're trying to do. But it also seems like a perversion of when they were in exile, they were told to get involved with their town and the lives and get married and do well, right? In the command of God when they were going into exile. And so that's what they did, was they became prominent people in those areas. They flourished, so to speak. And they've taken that ethic, but then they took it one step further, which was become the people in the area while still holding on to your physical presentation of being different. Your distinctives.
Yeah. I think so. I find it interesting that the upside downness of it all is the words they use.
Well, and it's funny because like
the subversive nature of the gospel,
they've turned this world upside down as if this world was correct.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. As if what they don't believe, but how they're acting is saying that they believe that this is good and that God is not trying to flip this upside down world right.
Yeah.
But because they're
as if death should reign.
Yes.
What do you think of the acting against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there's another king, Jesus?
Well,
Christus Rex, by the way.
If they have heard about Jesus being crucified, then they know he was crucified with the sign that said.
I doubt they would know.
Okay,
but I would expect Paul to tell them.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean. Is that now they know whether it was from Paul or because Pharisees back home said like, "Hey, have you seen?"
It was the Passover, so you could have had visitors.
Yeah, right. And he was killed, and Pilate put the sign up that said he claimed to be the King of the Jews. And
well, it's not that he said that. He said this is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
and then the Jews were like, just say he claimed. And he's like, what I've written, deal with it.
Yeah, deal with it. What are you going to do? Riot?
Yeah, almost.
I do like the Pilate's kind of calling them out on their behavior for what they end up doing in every city after. But you've got this idea of like, they kind of know what, whether from Paul or not, what he claimed.
Well, It does.
And now they're using that claim against him the same way that they used it against him.
This also cuts against a little bit of the low Christology view that you see propagated by some, right? It's like, well, the first Christians just thought Jesus was a great teacher and prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in fairness, this is not a proof text saying the first Christians believed Jesus to be God, which they did, by the way. But
Peter was pretty strong on that. You've killed the author of life.
Yeah. But it's another text of like, no, he's more than just teacher.
Yeah.
He's universal king.
Yes.
Right.
He is King of Kings.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then that leads us into the next part.
Quick point.
Okay.
Luke, this is another one of those passages behind civil authorities.
Yes.
This is another one of those passages where Luke's historical accuracy plays out.
Mm-hmm.
The authorities phrase is politarchs, like politic arc, like an archbishop, but a politarch. Politarch.
You got the word?
Kind of. Try to pronounce that, yeah.
Politarchus.
Politarchus?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it in Greek, not transliterated into. Okay, cool. However, that's behind his phrase authorities, and that's not common. That's not common throughout Greece. And so it's common to that city. That's the name of their leaders.
Well, and it's also like Paulus is city, and then
yes, but my point is that type of magistrate that I don't know about only it is rare. That is not a common phrase, and so for Luke to know that and get it right about that city.
And from other recordings of that city, we know that that's the term that they used.
Yeah, and it's just one of those other things where it's like, oh, if he didn't know, why would he have that detail?
Yeah. It's like in the previous story when they were in Laodicea. That happened, right?
I mean,
when they get called...
that is a thing. Oh, when they're called Zeus and Hermes.
Yeah, I believe it's there where Luke mentions that they didn't understand them. Yeah. Because they spoke this language. Mm-hmm. And he was like, you would only know that if you had been there. Because like the idea of, unless it was like specific major languages, like this area is Greek, this area is Aramaic, mm-hmm. You wouldn't know the specific dialect of Greek that this city speaks. Yeah. And unless you had been there. So
they have to leave Thessalonica.
Yes.
Why? Sorry. Can we... Couple more questions. Is that cool?
Yep.
Why do you think that they ask for money from Jason? And why is it that they think they let Jason go?
Security from Jason and the rest, they let them go.
Because here's and I'm borrowing this off of FF Bruce.
These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also, and Jason has received them, and they are all acting against the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, Jesus. And the people in the city authorities were disturbed when they heard these things. And when they had taken money as security from Jason, rest, they let them go.
I think it's like a security deposit.
Yeah.
Against Jason. Here's my argument for why I think Jason probably was a Christian beforehand.
Yeah.
He probably was pseudo instrumental, whether or not to inviting Paul and Timothy down.
Yeah.
And so the reason why they take a security deposit is don't invite these people back.
Correct.
This is a tax. There's a tax for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't know about a security deposit, but it is interesting that that it's not just a charge or a fine, money as security.
Yeah. Insurance.
Mm-hmm. So yeah.
It's one of those. There's probably an easy answer that we just haven't done enough research to find. But it is one of those odd things that happens in the New Testament that's isolated to like a singular event that would require.
FF Bruce does could it have been actually not just money, but like a thing?
Yeah.
Right. Like that is financially tied to like a building thing,
mm-hmm.
Livestock, whatever.
Yeah.
As though there's this monetary, hey, if this happens, or it could even be temporary, where it's like, hey, get him out of the city. We're going to take X amount of money from you. And if you don't, then we'll keep it. If not, well.
Yeah. So
that seems less
him.
likely. That seems less likely.
Yeah.
It seems probably, in my opinion, I think it's probably just a fine. And then saying, if he stays in the city, we'll keep fining you.
Mm-hmm. Expect this. Yeah. But then that leads them to verse 10, not chapter 10. What am I thinking? The brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. And when they arrived, they went into the Jewish synagogue, immediately back into the frying pan. Now these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. Luke just completely showing his hand where he's like, these guys were way better than those idiots. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Many of them therefore believed, with not a few Greek women of high standing as well as men. But when the Jews from Thessalonica learned that the word of God was proclaimed by Paul at Berea also, they came there too, agitating and stirring up the crowds. Then the brothers immediately sent Paul off on his way to the sea, but Silas and Timothy remained there. Those who conducted Paul brought him as far as Athens, and after receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him as soon as possible, they departed. Okay, so the first two things that stand out, this seems like this group was much more, as he says, they studied daily to see if these things were true. They were at least, okay, let's test if this guy's accurate.
Yeah.
Let's, if they're claiming Messiah, we don't want to miss the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get this correct, which I think is a healthier approach. Somebody makes a wild theological claim about Christianity.
What?
Let's hear him out.
Yeah. Well, I think, and contrast it with the scriptures, right? Whenever I think I've used this as my source quote for why against Mormons. Yeah. When they're like, why don't you just, evaluate any new revelation on its own merit? Yeah. I go, because the Bible clearly expects me to contrast it with old scripture. Anybody makes any religious claim, whether it be a new revelation or not, any religious claim, it is a noble thing to search the scriptures to see if what they're saying is true. Yeah. And that's what you should do when anybody has a word from God. Or
he also has a specific command in the Old Testament, though we are not bound to certain things. Like, we can have that discussion, but there is a specific command that when a prophet comes and claims to be preaching by the name of the Lord, that you have to test the prophecy. And if it is true, it is true. And if it is not, kill him. Now, that's not our command to kill the guy.
And also, it's whether or not that prophecy is like clairvoyancy, so future forward, or whether that's prophetic in like that preaching sort of way.
Correct.
Which the Old Testament blurs heavily.
Yeah. But there's still that command from God.
Yeah.
Directly.
Don't just believe things on the merit.
Claims to say something on my name. Don't just believe it because my name is invoked. Because he might be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Knowing that you're susceptible to listening to my voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the repeated phrase, and not a few Greek women, or not a few of the Greek women as did a great many of the devout Greeks and not a few of the leading women. And then in verse 12, therefore believed with not a few Greek women. Basically just Paul's way, Luke's way of saying a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is fine.
Yeah. It's just such a roundabout, extroverted way of saying it.
Yeah. There's reasons why Christians have used the term Berean as like a good title.
I've heard that maybe once.
Oh, okay. I think it's more common.
You're right.
That sounds like something they do, eh?
Yep.
Yeah.
Classic.
But yeah.
Okay, we're getting to one of my favorite parts of Acts, which is Paul in Athens.
Yeah, it's so good.
Because
what? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why do you think the stirring up of the crowds, the agitating of the crowds? Should we follow heretics and agitate crowds against them?
No.
Oh.
Peter specifically goes on later and he says, like, if you need to give a defense of the faith, but also you need to do it with kindness and gentleness. Like, if we are supposed to, when Jesus debated the Pharisees or the tax collectors or the Sadducees or the high priests, all that stuff, he did so with grace. And then when they were explicitly violent towards him or started to say some wild stuff, he would then get stronger on them. But he wouldn't get the 12 to start beating people up. He wouldn't. It was, we're having a discussion, you and I'll call you out on your sin, being a hypocrite or a brood of vipers, like various statements, whitewashed tombs, right? But it was always on the point. It wasn't just, we're going to subvert the argument by starting a riot, ad hominems, like other things. It was, even his quotes, like calling them hypocrites, was a theological presentation of the idea that he was arguing with them about. And also he had a certain authority to be able to do those things. And you see Peter, again, when he is debating with the Caiaphas and all of them, and he does call them out on, you killed the Christ, you killed the author of life. He's making bold claims to them. But again, it's the two of them having an argument with the leaders. Like, they're not. And so to contrast, I think, God's people from the people that are opposing them, you see them using the tactics of the enemy, using masses. You see that throughout the Old Testament. The nation or the army or the group is opposing God's people. And now it's them doing that to God's church.
Can I make an odd argument?
Yep.
In verse 14, it points out that the brothers immediately sent Paul off on his way to the sea, but Silas and Timothy remained there.
Mm-hmm.
I think, this is my theory.
Okay.
Paul was probably aggressive with his preaching.
Yes.
Extremely aggressive. Because their issues aren't, Jason believes this and believes that there's another King Jesus. Okay. Yeah. Silas and Timothy, they can preach whatever. But man, get that Paul guy out of here. And so my theory is probably Paul was just so aggressive, so in their face with the Thessalonians.
Yeah.
That there was this hatred towards the man.
Yep. Was it because he was aggressive, or was it because when he preached, half the congregation would convert?
It could be.
And so they were like,
I find it, but they don't really, when it's Silas and Timothy who would be preaching the same message, they're not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find it interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, our text doesn't say anything about that, but it's like,
yes. Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the cool part.
Yes. Now, while Paul was waiting, this is verse 16. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and the Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some had said, "What does this babbler wish to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities," because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, with what these things mean." Now, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their times in nothing except telling or hearing something new.
I think it's pronounced Areopagus. If someone's going to comment and tell us that we're wrong, we're probably both wrong. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Listen, you're allowed to think that. And I'm okay with that.
But I'm reading the text.
What's important is that this location is
Huge.
a forum, which is where we get the term in computers, forums like Reddit, where a bunch of people that think they're smart start yapping about ideas.
Sit around and discuss nonsense all day, I think is
Or
what Luke would say.
Who spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new.
Reddit.
Yes.
So he goes to the Jews
Yes.
first, as per his custom.
Yeah.
Right.
Goes to the synagogue of the Jews and the devout persons and in the marketplace.
And in the marketplaces. And
Basically, Paul's doing the tactic, go where the people are.
Yep.
People are going to be walking into that marketplace constantly. Paul's got things to sell.
Yeah.
For free.
So Athens has, at this point since Rome, has ceased being a massive political power.
Yeah.
Although a cultural power, it's still huge, right?
Yeah. And as you can tell, still very Greek because of the Epicurean and Stoic
and
philosophy still core to the city.
Yeah. Well,
not the Roman virtue culture.
Yes. Epicureanism being more what you could, and this would be wrong to make it clear one-to-one, but I'm going to make it anyway, would be more along the lines of hedonism.
Yeah.
Drink, dance, to be merry, enjoy life while it's here. And the Stoics being the more Marcus Aurelian, control emotions, all that kind of, and be master of your own will, do not let your will be mastered by your context.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
And that was the core difference. Like you were saying, it's not straight hedonism. It's not just go wild.
And Stoicism's not being a computer.
Yeah. And like the breakdown of them was both are how do you maximize happiness? And one said by living with experience and enjoying that which you are. And the other said, I must discipline myself in the ways that I can voluntarily so that when discipline is forced upon me in hardship, I am ready.
Yeah. Well, and it's also don't let your experiences define who you are.
Yeah.
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 And so it's two different systems of how do you get meaning?
Yeah.
And
the happiness that they're both speaking of is not pleasure.
No.
They're speaking of maximal human life. That's what they mean by happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul has come to give them the answer.
The babbler himself.
They're like, wait, this guy's saying new stuff. Get him up here.
Get him on the hill. No, but why do they call him a babbler?
I think because rather than having the discussion in the form that they would, in the very Socratic method that they would, in the place where you're supposed to have those, he's in the marketplace just freeloading ideas into people that are just passing by.
That is very Plato of him. That's true. I don't think so. I think it has to do with barbarian. I think it's just a term. It's like, this guy's not a Greek.
Yes. Though Paul does speak Greek.
Yeah.
So barbarian is usually a language that you don't understand.
Yeah, but I think they probably recognize, this guy's not like a...
I mean, he's also dressed differently.
Assuming.
And then he starts quoting their scripture. Sorry, not their scripture, their literature.
Mm-hmm.
Which is going to baffle them.
Yeah. I do find it, there is... Do you think... they take him to the Areopagus. May we know this new teaching that you are presenting. For you bring strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. Do you think, at least this is, you see this presented in the church fathers sometimes, where there's like the Jews see through expectation, right? Of like, God is working in the midst of history through the Jewish people, right? And yet you see, and they have this expectation in that way, right? And then the Greeks, the Gentiles, they have their philosophy, and they're trying to reach forward into trying to understand metaphysics and the longing within their hearts, right? And which would be the answers on the table at that point are Epicureanism and Stoicism, right?
Yeah.
Among many others. And so, what's presented as he reasons in Thessalonica and Berea, and so now he reasons with the Greeks. Well, he appeals to the shared scriptures that he has with the Jews. He will then appeal with the Greek philosophical works.
Yeah.
He appeals to both. He becomes all things for all people, that he might win some.
Yeah. And his history plays into that. His personal study under Gamaliel plays into that, which is how Gamaliel taught.
Yeah.
Okay. I heard a quote from the Mishnah itself about Gamaliel.
Mr. Mishnah.
So the Mishnah is the extra biblical, so the extra biblical source of Jewish writings about their discussions and their tradition outside of the Bible, about the Torah. It's called the Talmud. The summary of that, or highlights or parts of it, is called the Mishnah.
Phariseeism after Jesus?
Yes. So it has a history of their conversations over time and their arguments. There is a quote in there about Gamaliel and how important and insightful he was for Judaism. The quote is, "When Gamaliel died, so did the beauty of the Torah."
Really?
Yes.
That's how high of a view they had of Gamaliel.
Yes. That guy taught Paul.
I didn't know I knew they viewed him high, but holy moly.
Yeah. And so Gamaliel used to teach them, as Joel has brought up in previous episodes, with both a Jewish and a Greek literary education. And so what you're seeing is evidence of that in Paul's discussion.
I think it's important to point out one of the things that happens at the Areopagus is it's not just a forum to discuss ideas necessarily.
Yeah.
It does become that at many times.
Yes.
When someone new comes to the city, they're supposed to be presented to this kind of court of like the leading elites. Think about it this way. Like if you showed up in a town, right? Especially like, let's say you went to a college campus and you just started teaching something, right? You went on your own way, right? They would be like, okay, here, come into the academic building, tell our staff to see points of connection, to see if there's like, what's going on out in the middle amongst the students, right? And that's probably more what's going on here than just, come to the forum, even though that same place would be used as the forum.
Yes.
Yeah. That being said, though, all those ideas were all those ideas were brought in an interplay, like with Philo and Gamaliel. And so those ideas, those scholars that he's being brought to at the Areopagus, that are the modern profs of those philosophies, if you will, there's a touching point of the content of the philosophy between, Philo and Gamaliel would teach their students the Jewish perspective on such things. And so Paul's walking into this knowing who he's going to and what they believe.
Yeah. Yeah. This is another version of that quote. Since Rabbi Gamaliel the elder died, there has been no more reverence for the law, and the purity and piety died out of the same time. But let's get into Paul's discussion then with these Stoics and Epicureans.
Yeah, he presents his argument, his quote unquote.
He presents
philosophy.
his argument, and you get to see Gamaliel's teaching through Paul. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling places, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way towards him, find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead.
Awesome. Fantastic.
You're religious.
Mm-hmm.
You have you have many gods, but you have one that is unknown.
That you know
of, that you keep, that you worship to an extent. You have a history of seeing in your literary works, of seeing this God, so to speak, as connected to mankind through their very souls.
I mean, this is hitting the Stoics hard.
Well, this is also, I was going to bring up, this is hitting deep into our incarnation episode, which Athanasius brings up.
Mm-hmm.
He makes the same argument. You all believe that there is a God.
Yeah. There's some sort of metaphysical ultimate reality of person, perhaps. That is person.
That God has made himself known.
Mm-hmm.
And that God, because he is such a thing, could not, if you were logical, be contained to such an object because he is in all men.
Well, and his argument a bit is like, if we are lesser mirrors of him, you're going to say he is just
gold,
obviously a lesser categorically thing of us. Nah.
Are you saying the creator is a created thing?
Yeah.
A physical object in front of you
is less. If we are made in his image, which he doesn't explicitly say, although he points out that this is a concept that they have in their blindness still outlined.
Yeah. He is. We ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by art or the imagination of men.
Mm-hmm. But then he goes on to describe, in him we move and have our being. And even one of your own poets say, for we are indeed his offspring. And those two phrases, he's recognizing that in the Gentiles' blindness, they still have the outlined conception of, they've bumped up against the outlined conception of, but we are made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
And that God has made it possible for you to know, which is his Romans argument, that he's made it obvious.
But if we're made in the image of God, whatever degree what that means, and which they recognize, you're going to tell me that if we are the reflection of that
statue over there is him?
Yeah. We're not the reflection of the statue.
Yeah. We are much more. So that poet he quotes is Epimenides in his writing Critica 1. The passage he reads is, they fashioned a tomb for you, holy and high one. Cretans, always liars, evil beasts, idle bellies, but you are not dead. You live and abide forever, for in you we live and move and have our being.
Wild. Yeah. Now, of course, in context, it's not
that what we are reading, what we are thinking by reading that is not what the Greek is understanding.
Nevertheless, and the early church fathers pointed out again, what the Jews knew could find, what the Jews had access to by revealed scripture. Yeah. They had one thing. They had the covenant relationship, all that, and the law of God. But the Gentiles, though their blindness, they stumbled. Right? And you even see that reflected in things like Isaiah, among the it's
Yeah. But what's cool about this passage, because Paul quotes the Cretans, always liars, evil beasts, idle belly, with idle bellies, whatever, is the quote that he uses in Titus when he's telling Titus, hey, you got to hammer these guys down. These
lazy
Cretans,
liars.
They're horrible. But what this passage is saying is the Cretans, these evil people, fashioned a tomb for this Holy One who lives and moves through them. And so what Paul is saying here is that God lives and moves is the God of the Bible. And what he's saying in Titus is those evil people are still God's people. And so he's making the same argument that is happening in this passage in two different, he's not just quoting it, he's making the same argument as Epimenides in his poem about how evil people still can worship God and be with God.
Well, he's making the argument that this is still very attractive for the Stoic, because the Stoic would believe in the whether you call it the world spirit or many other names, but there's this immanent divinity that is the cause of things, and that is in and moving and empowers and sustains all
and
things.
Is the reason why you evil, pathetic human is able to do things like turn your weak, evil desires, discipline them into becoming noble characters, that you, and evil wretch, and could become a hero.
And that's called even godliness in their system.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second quote for we are indeed his offspring is from Artius's poem Where
is it?
It's right there. It's in English. Well, it's transliterated. Let me look at my screen. Phanonomia.
No, it's phenomena.
Is that phenomena? No, you're right.
Yeah. It's just transliterated rather than spelled in English.
And I
Phenomena.
Let me up my thing. I need glasses. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have the context for that, but
well, it's just,
I do have a question for you.
Okay.
When presenting the gospel to non-Christians or non-Jews at this point, where they don't have the shared authoritative resource of Scripture, he does not reference Scripture.
Yes.
Not as his proof text. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have Scripture all over his mind when he's talking about it, because Scripture clearly is all over his arguments around.
Yes.
However, his text, his proof text, if you will, are of a shared resource.
Yeah, you could easily see him after this going, oh, and are you interested? Yeah. Okay, let me show you what it says in my book.
Yeah.
Oh, it also says the same thing that you guys have been talking about for 700 years. By the way, because the poem he's quoting is 700 years old at that point.
Well, it gets into what the church fathers pointed out, where there's this God was at work in the Greeks.
Yeah.
Just maybe not just as much, but depending on how you articulate it, just as much as he was in the Gentiles, preparing the world. And this is where you get Paul's even argument, in the fullness of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we do this as Christians. We do this all the time. When you have discussions with non-Christians, you'll see people on the internet, or even Caleb, I'm sure you've done this with people that are not Christians. You'll see yourself quote like current things or philosophy or other things, Marvel, whatever, to show, hey, look, there's this ethic. You can see or like the Tom Holland approach of, look, history has been moving in this direction. That seems like God's doing something. And it's always been in the direction of Christianity, oddly. Weird, right? You see the effect that Christianity, just the people have had on history. He's not even making claims about like the moral claims, but just the dominating effect. So what you see is that as Christians, we tend to, when we're talking with people that are not versed in the Bible or use it as an appeal to authority, we, like Paul, tend to talk about things that are not the Bible and then slowly move into, oh, and this is what the Bible says.
Well, and that even kind of matches what C.S. Lewis does, the whole, by Christ, by Christianity. Christianity is like the sun. It's not. Yeah. It is by it that I see everything else.
Yes.
And I think part of whether we live in a almost post-Christian society, there are still echoes of it everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. And so I think what we can do, especially one of the things that's available for us, is to point out where the light is still shining, where we agree.
Yeah.
Right.
Why
do you believe in human rights? Like, for real? Why?
Or what is true in Buddhism that I can use to defend Christianity and say, hey, Buddhism is right on this. I agree with it there. But I think you see that in Christianity presented better. And there are many things in Buddhism that I think are wrong because this. And then that leads into a conversation of you. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
However, at the end, verse 30 to 31.
Yeah.
The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by man, whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead.
Yeah. He doesn't get into this man is God idea. It's just, he's picked a man. So
it is wild, his presentation of the argument here as opposed to some other places.
Well, it's also, hear me out. God has chosen a champion, or God has chosen an individual, is a very Greek idea of what's going on. There's God, and he's picked Perseus to go and fight this monster. He's picked Hercules to go and fight this. Like, that's a very Greek idea. And what you see when the Philistines in the Samuel episode that we talked about, there was the champion warfare idea where the king would choose a man to fight on the kingdom's behalf. And you see, like, that's a very repeated throughout many ways, a Greek Mediterranean idea.
It's currently the Olympics. It's also kind of what we do now.
Yeah. Pick these
Canada
people.
has sent these people. The US has sent these people.
Yeah. And he's saying and it's funny because now he's reversing the idea of like, if we believe that he is in us and he's not a statue, he's not an idea like made in the human image or art or anything, but he is a man. That is
however, something that the Stoics and the Epicureans would just not even have a reasonable, like, to them, it would seem like utter nonsense is what he ends on.
Yeah. Now, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked him, but others said, we will hear you again about this. So Paul went out from their midst, but some men joined him and believed. Among them also were Dionysius and the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them.
So it seems as though not many were convinced.
A man named Dionysius following him is a wild coincidence considering what happened with the Olympics. Anyways.
Yeah, very. Let's not quite get into that.
It's not Dionysus.
It's not Dionysus. Is it?
Very similar.
It's so close.
It's a variation of the name.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Dionysius. Yeah, it is. It's Dionysius. Yeah. Cool. So, the breakdown is.
Here's the thing: is it's because of in the Greek search, grasping in the dark, trying to find some sort of evidence of meaning, right? They're grasping into the metaphysical. They had denied the validity of the physical.
Yes.
Right. And they'd seen it as evil, bad, corruptible, temporary, all those words. Right.
Yep.
And so the mere idea that God is using the physical, that like resurrection of the dead.
Yeah.
Right. And he hasn't even made the whole argument that, and all will be raised from the dead and reality itself will be made right. He hasn't even said any of that.
Because many of these Greek philosophers also, it's funny. So Stoicism does mix with Christianity a bit, is taken on and made better.
Like most things, like Stoicism got normalized into Roman culture. And the best parts lived on. In the same way that existentialism.
Yeah.
However, maybe some bad parts also have lived on.
Yeah. But again, also those philosophies also developed into Gnosticism, which became a massive issue. And part of that Gnostic idea was there was another, again, the reason I brought up the Dionysius reference was because around this area, because of Socrates, who was known for being a part of the Dionysian cult, and near Jesus in Galilee, where was one of the hubs of the Dionysian cult, had a very similar practice to communion, where you would eat laced bread and laced wine to commune with the dead before you. And there are bad Christian sects that got confused with the Dionysian cult that became heretics, that were cast off. And they kind of merged in some areas in northern Greece, and became some of the weird stuff that you've sent me about, the weird Eucharistic cults.
That was in Asia Minor. But at that point, Asia Minor and Greek is all Greek culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the confusion that everybody was trying to come up with during the Olympics, was that like, is this Dionysian or it was very obviously the Last Supper.
I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
It's both.
Yes. But it was they had said the Last Supper and then they had deleted that post.
Yeah.
That was part of they were like, we never claimed that. And it's, yeah.
But it is both.
Yes.
Because it is not the first time that heretics have blurred the two, and it won't be the last.
It won't be the last. And there's even a lot of discussions about it on the atheistic intellectual web stuff right now about like, does communion come from that? And it didn't. It very much came from Jesus, and
it has bigger ties into the Old Testament.
Exactly.
Now,
but it's just
his convert is an Areopagite.
Yes.
Meaning this dude's there all the time.
He's not even from Athens. He's from that little tiny building.
Well, and that would be on the big, if you Google photos of Athens, that's that big like plateau in the middle.
Yes.
Where all their temples, but also their philosophical schools are. And,
yeah. The Areopagus is the Roman name for the Greek site known as the Acropolis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a dope. The whole history of Athens is such a
awesome.
It's wild. Greeks.
But I think both the general and the specific resurrection, that is still the laughingstock of Christianity, I think, to a certain degree.
Well, yeah. And do you think this is the moment where that kind of sticks with Paul on why he writes in Corinthians? It is the foolishness, is the stumbling block to the Greeks, and the foolishness to Greeks and the stumbling block to the Jews.
I wouldn't be shocked about that. Because you even see Christians today that lessen, like that downplay the general resurrection. Because people are like, oh, Son of God raised? Cool. Okay. I guess. But then it's like, yeah, but all are raised.
Well, I think it's because most of them, through, I'm going to say watered down gospel Protestantism, certain groups,
sure,
kind of just talk about going to heaven.
Yep.
And not the truth that Jesus presented of a new earth, resurrected bodies, cleansed reality, God coming down with the city of New Jerusalem.
Yeah, all of that
stuff. And it kind of just got wrapped up in, we're going to heaven one day.
In fairness, is because for some, that is easily mockable.
Yes.
Really? Reality itself is going to be reworked? What do you mean? Look at science.
What do you mean we're not going to get married?
So look at the heat death of the universe. That's guaranteed, man. Well, you're going to say the laws of reality must change so that your, prophecy from a book 2,000 years ago has to come true?
Yes, because that was who can Who can make straight what the Lord has made crooked?
The Lord.
Yes. But yeah, you see them just immediately. It's so funny that the Greeks, the ones who have all the myths about gods doing crazy stuff like Hercules defeating like the 13, all that stuff, right? And then some dude brings up a resurrection and they're just like, that's a myth.
Well, it might be a different way in that same thing where it's like, oh yeah, the gods are on Olympus, and everybody's like, yeah, we know the gods aren't on Olympus.
Yeah,
if there was one guy that was like, no, for real.
Yeah.
And is that kind of what's going on? Where it's like, oh, this such and such a god raised from the dead, such and such a god did this, and then one guy goes, yeah, no, but like God really did do that through the dude. Because
like we were saying, you also got to see the Greeks have been going down this path of the body, what becomes Gnosticism of the metaphysical or the mind or the spiritual is more important than the physical.
It goes all the way back to Plato and earlier.
Yeah. But like, and you see that in them by saying, like ideas like the gods are not physical beings that are at the top of the mountain, but rather what would be called authorities or principalities that embody or move individuals, which later gets turned into a term called daemon, which later gets turned in the New Testament called possession.
Mm-hmm.
You've been possessed by a spirit, which is a wild. And Paul's saying, hey, not that.
Yeah. I find
he's real. Well, it is also the classic, like these guys are the intellectuals, and many of the debates currently between Christianity and atheism is between high level philosophers and intellectuals and them going, resurrection, really?
Yeah.
Like it's the same.
But you notice there's the same, even among the non-Christian intellectuals, there's still the same response. There's mocking, and then there's, I'm going to hear more about this.
Yep.
And then there are
what you don't hear is let's start a riot.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, that didn't happen in Athens.
But this is interesting. I would want to bring this because you see a lot of people like Douglas Murray, other intellectuals go, I can like they'll say something like this. I can follow along with the historical notes of the benefits of Christianity for culture. Mm-hmm. I can go along with maybe this moralistic teaching is better for me or the best teaching. Mm-hmm.
This is the truest and most useful myth that we have ever created.
Yeah. Or I could even believe that there is a God, but the resurrection, but Jesus coming back from the dead. Really? I have to believe that.
Factually?
Yeah. As a real tangible thing and not just some concept, which I have to semi-hold and emulate in my life and blah, blah, blah. It's a great, yeah. It's that happened. And that if it didn't happen, that is the thing that these philosophers are saying, just in other terms of they're listening to Paul. They want to hear what he has to say because he's got this new teaching. It's interesting. He's saying they're following with his Greek stuff of, oh, look, this is good. The moment he brings up the resurrection, I don't know.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. This is crazy. And then some are going, yeah, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so they'll listen a little bit more.
I think this may even be this is something that you tell us on the Second Rate Saints all the time. When it's one of us presents a wild idea.
Yes.
You have told myself and the other members of the Second Rate Saints to go, hang on. That might be a wild idea, but we know each other aren't stupid.
Yeah. I don't understand your idea. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you got there. And I know you're not stupid. So let me hear how you got there.
Yeah. Rather than just going, oh, you're just dumb. You don't know what you're talking about. And you see that kind of reflected in in the two groups. There's the ones who mock, and then there's the others who are like,
this Paul guy knows what he's talking about.
This Paul guy's educated. Paul guy is smart. Let's hear him out. And I think you still see that in the atheist Christian dialogue.
Because they'll still talk to them.
Because they'll still talk, but not just they'll still talk to them. They're still like, man, I would not want to debate. What's William Lane Craig?
Yeah.
Smart dude.
Yeah.
Like he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Or John Lennox or something.
Well, you even see that in, again, in one of the more recent Joe Rogan episodes with a guy named James Lindsay, who was a rabid atheist. And Joe Rogan asked him, like, so life has changed for you. What happened? And he's like, well, I stopped thinking religion was awful. And I started going to church, and I realized that maybe religion can be a good thing. And then Joe Rogan said, yeah, I used to throw out the idea that religion could be good. It gives a moral framework and holds people together in hard times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
Where like the one guy's definitely an atheist, but his guest was an atheist, rabid throughout history, politically, stuff like that. And just realized one day, maybe I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, and part of the argument is it's just other smart people disagree, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Jesus. Well, it is also, it is kind of funny. Like, I know it's on purpose, but it is kind of funny that it does hinge on you. Every human will die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hinged on the one thing that every human in every culture ever has always believed, that every human will die.
Yep.
And we are hinged on one belief. A guy didn't die.
Well, a guy did.
Yes.
That a guy conquered death itself.
Yeah. And then came back.
Yeah.
And then you have to tell people that. And then all of human history is screaming, no.
Kind of. We pointed this out a little bit in our incarnation stuff when we were talking. The whole episode was really inspired on the incarnation by St. Athanasius. The whole point is like, yeah, he did die. Mm-hmm. And yet, as the Christians claim, he was raised to life and now reigns in heaven. And then St. Athanasius' point is, what kind of dead man has the impact in the real world like that? Yes. What kind of dead man causes liars to become truth seekers and truth tellers?
Yes.
What kind of dead man brings the alcoholic to become sober? What kind of dead man what kind of force does that?
Yeah.
And you could even, now that we've had much more time for human history, you can do the whole, what kind of force causes an empire that dominates the sea to cost itself billions of dollars out of the pursuit of saying, no, they're made in the image of God too. Mm-hmm. What kind of empire?
For just some abstract, very real, but at what would be conceptual for those who believe that slavery is legitimate, for some abstract idea.
Yeah. Because they really believe it, right? But that was a standard.
It was true.
That was a standard thing throughout human history. But what kind of force does that to men? What kind of force gives? And he even goes to have people make vows of chastity, to face death with honor and courage that is not seen in any other philosophical school as consistently as this one. What kind of dead man does that?
Yeah. Yeah. And then also the history is screaming at you, every man dies, but it's also screaming at you that every human has always had the hope that there was a way out. Every culture has been desiring, through myth, through religion, through the desire not to die, to be immortal, has always been screaming, I don't want to die. Yeah. And stories of
gods. Looks for the eternal life. And this guy has it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep.
But I think we're gonna wrap it up. If you've made it this far, thank you. Just Josh and I, but I hope all you listeners came along with us. Just
know that you're our favorite fans.
Oh yes.
They have stuck through with
just the two of us.
Yeah. Just the two of us.
We try. That's Acts 17. So if you want to find
the song, what we talked about.
Yeah. That was Acts 17. If you want to see our previous episodes, especially on Acts or just in general, like the one that the incarnation episode, you can find that at our website, It's www.secondratesaints.com, which has links to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our YouTube. There you can find links to help support us at Buy Me a Coffee, which you can also go to www.buymeacoffee.com/second-rate-saints. But there you can also send us your comments, concerns, questions. You can also just email them to us rather than just that chat feature on the website. You can email us at second-rate-saints@gmail.com. Yeah. Also, this is 99. This is episode 99.
Yes.
It's
next week.
Next week is the 100th episode. Woo! So it's kind of fitting that for our last 2-digit episode, there's only 2 second-rate saints here. Yeah, that's all I got. That's the best I got. This is not a funny episode. I'm sorry, guys. You got the 2 guys that aren't funny.
2 9s then?
What do you mean?
Like 9 out of 10? 9 out of 10 humans?
We're 9 out of 10 humans. I don't even understand what you're talking about.
99 is the last 2-digit episode with 2 people.
I got it.
We're each a 9 out of 10.
No.
Yeah.
Look at me.
They can't.
Well, they can hear my voice, though, and infer what that is.
That's a man.
It's true.
They can assume your gender.
I will let you assume my gender. Except you can still be wrong. Anyway.
Yep. This episode's ending on a gender joke.